Blog Talk Radio. Blog Talk Radio.
You're listening to Pipebomb Radio with your host, the founder, Felix Olmedo,
the Tower of Power, too sweet to be sour,
and the Godfather, Nate Milton.
Godfather's in the house.
You're welcome.
Do I have everybody's attention now?
Welcome everybody to Pipebomb Radio this evening as we welcome one of our, without a doubt, one of the biggest names we've had on the show this year next to Bret Hart. Not taking anything away from any of our other guests, but this man who we have on tonight is without a doubt a man who has one of the greatest resumes out there in professional wrestling history right now. He has wrestled in just about every wrestling organization out there that has been there, past or present, and is a decorated champion. He wrestled with his father, with his father's company, and the lineage of wrestling history in his family is just incredible. You know, you talk about Jerry Jarrett, and just looking at his son Jeff, who is our guest tonight, his resume speaks for itself. He wrestled for the WWF back in the early 90s, I would say about early to mid-90s during the New Generation era as Double J, Jeff Jarrett. He wrestled in the WCW as the Chosen One. He wrestled again during the Attitude Era, during the height of the Attitude Era, when he faced Chyna for that infamous Intercontinental title match that she won the title from. And then, of course, he and his father created Impact Wrestling, TNA Wrestling, however you know it, with the help of the Carters. And of course, most recently, with the help of his wife, Karen, he and Jeff and Karen have been taking the wrestling world by storm. They have gone in and acquired some of the biggest talent around the world. Jeff has had an incredible career. If I had to pinpoint some of the favorite moments that we'll talk about with him, definitely touch on briefly, of course, his run in the WWF, when he got to work with The Undertaker. I know in his run in the WCW, I was a big fan of his work with being the Chosen One, but he got to work with some of the biggest names in wrestling history with the likes of Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage. You look at, I'm trying to think of other names as well, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, and just to name a few. Just to name a few. He's worked around. He's worked in New Japan Pro Wrestling, a part of the Bullet Club, and now with the Global Force Wrestling taking the world by storm, and their upcoming shows that they've got booked up, and hopefully they make it this way to California. I for one, wouldn't mind checking it out, getting the opportunity to check out Global Force in full force. For that matter, it would have been nice to have been checking out a TNA show, I'm not going to lie, as most of the world was shocked. The wrestling world was shocked to see the return of Jeff and Karen Jarrett just a few weeks ago. And even Jeff's return to the ring in the King of the Mountain match, where he won the King of the Mountain championship. And a lot of the TNA guys are going over to Global Force. Most recently, they announced Magnus, Mickie James, and if I'm not mistaken, I just saw Eric Young, who was invited to Global Force to compete for that title. Now, if I'm not mistaken, and I believe we talked about this on one of our previous shows, Jeff actually was going to be inducted. It was announced by Dixie Carter that Jeff was going to be the next inductee into the TNA Wrestling Hall of Fame. And if there was anybody so more deserving who helped carry that company on his back, without a doubt, Jeff Jarrett would be prime candidate. In fact, most believe he should have been the first one inducted, not taking anything away from previous inductees, because they all deserve their own wing in the Hall of Fame, with any Hall of Fame for that matter. And let's just say, just so many moments, so many great moments that this man has had in his career, working with the likes of Ric Flair, working with the likes of Hulk Hogan. Who could ever forget that moment when Jeff smashed Hogan over the head with the guitar? His infamous guitar shot. You know, working with Razor Ramon, Scott Hall. You know, working with even working with Jerry the King of Lawler. You know, I still remember he was in that movie with Jerry, with Michael J. Fox. The name escapes my mind at the moment, but if I can remember, I will definitely remind Jeff about that. And just talking about the life he had, because as I watched a documentary on Jeff, he had mentioned that his grandmother was a booker in professional wrestling, which during those times was unheard of, because you don't see too many women taking part as being a booker, at least back in those days. You know, you think about the, I believe it was High Chief Peter Maivia's wife, Leah Maivia, who was a booker, and of course Jeff's grandmother, and of course Jeff's father, the infamous Jerry Jarrett. Rumor has it that he was, when Vince was going through those issues with the steroid trial back in the early 90s, Jerry was going to be brought in to run WWE had Vince had to go to jail. But that's another story. So many stories that could be brought up with Jeff. Jeff has one of the greatest careers, and he is still so young. He okay, you know what? Many will say, well, I don't know, he's 46, you know, 40, or he's in his 40s. How could you say that? Well, you know what? Just look at that. He's a bona fide Hall of Fame for any wrestling Hall of Fame. He's a Hall of Famer, excuse me. And getting the opportunity to get in the ring with some of the biggest names, what an honor. You know? And then for that matter, let alone be Jeff Jarrett. Jeff has had an amazing career. And if he were to hang it up today, I would say he probably has no regrets. Now, I'm pretty sure he'll probably wrestle a couple more years and still help mold the next generation for his talent pool, and rightfully so. If there's anybody these youngsters could learn from, it would be from Jeff Jarrett. Get in the ring, learn ring psychology, learn about how to sell to the crowd, learn about just how to be out there and market yourself. You know, I would love to see, I know it's too soon to say now, but I would love to see, once this company gets picked up and continues to grow, which it's growing now, but to see a competition where young talent can come in and show themselves, because this is similar to what TNA did in the early years. They had so much new talent. Now, true, they have established themselves in the independent circuits and, of course, around the world, but not many people were familiar with a lot of these young stars that were coming in, like a Christopher Daniels, like an AJ Styles, like a Samoa Joe, like a Frankie Kazarian. Nobody knew who these guys were, and Jeff would give them a platform to have that. When Impact Wrestling first came around, and I was watching it in 2004, I had no idea who a lot of these guys were. And the more I watched, I remember watching it on, I believe it was FSN, because I was living in Florida at the time, and so many new faces, and then I seen Jeff, and I'm like, well, maybe this is what happened to him, because I'd always wondered, after WCW had closed its doors and WWF wasn't interested, where he was going to go. And when I seen this and the opportunities and just this company just completely grow, I was just so impressed and had been following it ever since. And here we are today, 10 years later, and just so many changes have happened. And it's going to be an honor to have him on and just talk about little pieces of his career throughout the last, I want to say how long he's been wrestling. I'm going to say 20, maybe 25 years, maybe 30. You know, he started young, and he just had an incredible career. And it to touch on what he's doing now for this new batch of talent that he's got for Global Force Wrestling, and what he and his wife are doing. And I know they're traveling around, and they're still traveling around to help build up this incredible company that's definitely, you know what, it gives the fans an alternative to watch, because I know most are saying, well, the WWE is the be-all, end-all place to be, and nobody's going to take that giant down. Well, it's not about that. It's about giving the fans something else to watch. Right now, it's so oversaturated with WWE television that I would love to see more television shows involving Impact, involving Ring of Honor, involving Global Force. I really do hope and pray that Global Force gets picked up for a television show. Well, how cool would that be? You get to get in there and see incredible talent, showcase their talents to a television audience, not to mention the audiences who are there live. And in the venues that he's chosen, I think it's smart because it's in the places that you'd least expect to see. Now, don't get me wrong. I think the idea that TNA had done when they had the Impact Zone was smart too, because it was very similar to what Bischoff did in the 90s with Worldwide, and they put it in the MGM studios in Disney, which is kind of close to where they had Impact, the tapings at. But Impact, I think, is done at Universal, if I'm not mistaken. But that being said, Nate should be calling in here in just a bit as well as Jeff. Jeff should be calling in here momentarily. And we'll go ahead and have this discussion as far as what's to come. Obviously, you guys enjoyed the Battleground breakdown last week. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the pay-per-view as well. Was it last week? I want to think it was last week. My mind tends to slip as we approach August coming up here soon. But this summertime has been a strange one. It's been hot, it's been cold, it's been everywhere in between. But then again, here in California, that's the California weather for you. But I am curious to see what Jeff's experiences were like working in the WCW with the Macho Man. You know, working in the 90s with The Undertaker. Two of my all-time favorites. And even if he's okay with it, maybe sharing a memory of working with Dusty. Dusty has worked in just about every career there has been, and you know, it's just incredible to see where it's going at this point. Hey, Nate, is that you?
That is me, sir.
Oh my goodness, you have no idea how much I was panicking. I'm sure you probably figured that out. But Jeff should be calling in here momentarily. In the meantime, I've just been touching on some high points in the career of Jeff Jarrett, and he's had such an incredible career. He could be first ballot Hall of Famer for just about any wrestling company around the world, really. And he's and I was mentioning he's such a young man still. I mean, he's not old. I mean, some people say, you know what, for being in his mid-40s, that's kind of old. Well, you know what? I don't think so. He doesn't even look that old, to be honest with you. Excuse me.
No, it's like Jeff said on Impact the other night. You know, he may not be as good as he once was, but once he's as good as he ever was. And just the knowledge that he has picked up over the years being born into the business. You talk about WCW, WWF, TNA, and now the Global Force Wrestling Project. You know, he is somebody that I am really excited about in terms of, you know, taking wrestling into that next stage. You know, we live in an era of social media and there's a lot of different programming out there, and I'm really excited to see what type of impact, no pun intended, Jeff can have with this new project.
Now, if you had to pinpoint maybe two matches, maybe two people he's worked with, if you could think of two. I know it's hard to just name two, but well, let's just say from his WWF days, if you had to pick one opponent or two that were some of your favorite matches that he's worked with in the WWF, who do you think was some of his best opponents that he worked with?
I think Jeff, you know, was part of that up-and-coming young group. You know, you had guys like the late, great Owen Hart and Razor Ramon, and, of course, you know, Bret Hart was still there, the 1, 2, 3 Kid, Sean Waltman, and he was part of that young group that really was, you know, exciting in the mid-card and the undercard. And then when you talk about WCW, one of my favorite matches ever was at that infamous pay-per-view where Vince Russo changed the game, and you had Booker T and Jeff Jarrett fighting for the WCW title. It was kind of the changing of the guard.
Very true. That, you know, I as I was saying, those moments that he got to work with some of the biggest names in the world, and some of the moments in time that are just historic. I mean, you think about the time when he was leaving the WWF and going to WCW and dropped the title to China. You think about the infamous guitar smash over the head of Hogan. I think it was in Japan when they were doing when Hogan was first going to come in, and yep. I think he was still technically active at that time, and he smashed Hogan over the head. Or even for that matter, when Kurt Angle first made his appearance in Impact Wrestling, that I don't know if there was ever a moment to me that shocked the wrestling world for Impact, and definitely for the better, was when Kurt came aboard. Nobody's seen that coming. Oh, no, it's true. It's real. It's real true. There you go.
And I mean, if you're a fan of wrestling, man, like you've got to be excited about what's going on with Global Force, because we talk about just names like the Young Bucks, just names like Mickey James and Nick Aldis, formerly Magnus, and Chael Sonnen from the world of MMA being associated with this project. I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can do with this talent roster.
That's what I was thinking too. I was like, it would be awesome to see them get a TV deal. Maybe, dare I say, now I'm not sure if Spike's even completely out of the picture with wrestling altogether, but what if Global Force were to get the Spike TV spot, and that way he could showcase his talent pool that he's gotten? Because, as I was mentioning earlier, that he and Karen had been traveling the world, picking and choosing this incredible talent pool that they've gotten. Now, true, their guys is obviously there's a larger amount of guys than there is women, but that's going to change. Obviously, they've got Thea Trinidad, they've got Lady Tapa, they've got recently announced Mickey James, and that's a who's who as it is. But I mean, at the same time, I do expect more to show up. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if we've seen Tara, Victoria, however you want to recognize her, show up in Global Force, or maybe even who else is a good name? And I'm drawing a blank for a second here. If we were to see, what about Velvet? What if Velvet, maybe her deal with TNA fell through and she went over to Global? It's a possibility. I mean, and then the guys, there's a lot of talent that I think are going to thrive a lot more with Jeff than they ever could, whether it be an Impact, Ring of Honor, or the WWE, because I think he's going to allow them to showcase their talents more than ever, because I think he's going to go with that formula that he did about 10 years ago when I was watching Impact when they were still doing their weekly pay-per-views, and I want to say it was Fox Sports Net, Florida Sports Net, I can't remember exactly what it was called, and they were doing their weekly pay-per-views, and and then they were doing I think it was a 30-minute or an hour TV show they were doing every other week or every month or something, and nobody knew at that time, at least I didn't, who AJ Styles was, who was Samoa Joe, Christopher Daniels, Frankie Kazarian, Elix Skipper, just to name a few. Not many people knew who they were at that time, and he gave them that platform to make a name for themselves, and they certainly did. And now, even 10, 12 years later, they're some of the biggest names in the world now. I mean, you see obviously what AJ's done, where Joe's at now, and then of course Daniels and Kazarian are over in Ring of Honor kicking butt, and that's a formula, and I think that's a formula for success, because he's breeding for the future. Breeding? Is that the right word? Is he preparing? Maybe preparing is a better word for the future. And that's where I think, honestly, and just between you and I think sometimes that's what WWE lacks. They were doing that quite often in the 90s, but tend to push away from that more over the last 5 to 7 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the same thing with TNA. TNA was pushing away from that concept that worked so well for them, where they were pushing the young talent, and instead they would want to bring in the old school talent like a Hogan, a Bischoff, a Flair, a Hardy. Not saying that the Hardys are old, but they they were already established. It was almost like creating another WCW.
And I think that's what I like about Global Force right now. They've got a good mix of established names, like a Scott Steiner, like a Colt Cabana, like a Sanjay Dutt. But then you've also got these up-and-coming cats like Moose or Seiya Sanada or Luke Hawks, friend of the program. And I'm really interested to see, what they can do. So I hope they're able to find a TV partner, because, Lord knows the wrestling business needs more competition. And I think somebody with the mind of a Jeff Jarrett is in a prime position to offer competition not only to the WWE, but also to companies like ROH or Lucha Underground or even TNA.
Very true. Lucha Underground is another one that's been up and coming, but at the same time, Lucha Underground, I think, has been more of considered like a TV show as opposed to a wrestling show.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I know Jeff is going to be probably coming on to talk about their upcoming show that they've got. I believe it's that already passed. Technically, it would have been the 24th. Well, anyways, they've got upcoming shows they're going to be doing throughout the summer, and that's one thing they were going to be touching on. And I don't know. I think if they continue to work with Impact Wrestling, as I was saying, they were talking about doing the. You are the TNA guy, so I'm going to question you about this real quick. Wasn't it possible? Wasn't it sure that they were going to put? And they announced this. I think Dixie announced that Jarrett was going to go into their Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. Is that right?
Yes.
Or has he already been?
That is correct. That is correct. He has been announced, and I believe they're going to be doing the ceremony. Usually they do it at Bound for Glory, but I think this year they're going to make it a special edition of Impact on Destination America.
Oh, well, even better. Because, I mean, Jeff's been making appearances, and I think EY was supposed to be invited to come on the show, too. Or not the show, excuse me, the Global Force to fight for the King of the Mountain world title. Isn't that what it's called now?
Yep, and he's already been, if you follow Global Force or Jeff Jarrett on Twitter, he's always posting photos from these events at these on their baseball stadium tour. And, EY recently, I guess, showed up trying to cause some trouble, as EY often does. And Miss Karen Jarrett was having none of that. So it'd be interesting to see how this progresses. And people are talking about Global Force versus TNA and what that would look like. And I'm really interested to see what the next let's say 6 months holds for both Global Force and TNA.
There you go. But, my favorite rivalry that I don't know if I can pinpoint a favorite one, but I think, if anything, we'll get more into that as we go ahead and welcome our guest of honor, the legendary Jeff Jarrett. Mr. Jarrett, hello.
Hello, how are you doing today?
Doing good, sir. How are you?
Good. Busy day already, but appreciate you having me on and ready to talk some Global Force Wrestling.
Sounds good to me, sir. I want to introduce you to my co-host and partner, Nate Milton. Nate, this is Mr. Jeff Jarrett.
How you doing, sir?
Good. How you doing, Nate? How's it going? Where are you guys located at today?
I'm actually in Southern California. Nate is out of Virginia.
Wow, we're hitting all time zones this morning.
That's right. Hey, got to spread the word, man. Got to spread the word. We're going to touch on a lot of things. I definitely want to touch on Global Force, learn more about what's going on with you guys in Global Force. If you don't mind, if we take a little tidbits throughout your career and then definitely push full force with Global Force, is that okay?
Sure.
In the beginning, I know, as many people already know, you have a lineage, you have a history in the world of professional wrestling dating back to, if I'm correct, your grandmother was a booker in professional wrestling. Is that correct?
She wasn't a booker. She actually took a second job selling wrestling tickets in downtown Nashville, and then she worked her way up to what you would call a CFO. She worked in the the business and the number side of things, and then she. After that, she, with my father, she became a promoter as well.
Gotcha. Okay.
Now, Jeff, you talk about that history and that family lineage. Was there ever a doubt that you would enter the world of professional wrestling, or was there a moment when you were younger that you were just like, I want to be Jeff Jarrett the accountant or Jeff Jarrett the gym teacher?
Growing up, when I was a kid, I loved basketball, and I played college ball 1 year. But I've got 4 siblings, and I'm the only one that took this as a career because at a real early age, I was mesmerized. I loved sort of every aspect of the business, not just the in-ring action. I love the marketing side, the promotional side. The concession stands as a young kid that I guess sell Cokes and popcorn and stuff like that, and the merchandising side. So I really was fascinated by all aspects of it from a real young age, and just loved it. And then obviously when I got up to the age to referee and later to wrestle, I love it. To this day, I'm probably one of the biggest wrestling fans in the world.
That's awesome. And I wanted to touch on a moment that was something that stood out to me many, many years ago. It was actually in a movie, and I happened to be watching a movie that included Michael J. Fox, and he was at a wrestling event, and he watched Jerry the King Lawler face against a masked wrestler by the name of Jeff Jarrett. Do you remember that whole incident and that whole, I wouldn't say incident,
Yep.
but that whole time? What was that like for you to be a part of that and work with Mr. Fox, of course, and that whole time being in a movie.
It was really cool. We shot I can remember that how that sort of came down pretty quickly, and if I remember correctly, Bill Apter sort of made the original contact, and I'm not sure who his contact was, but we flew up to Toronto and stayed at a Four Seasons hotel, and as a young kid, I was like, wow, this is really nice. And then Lawler, Under the Mask, which is, I grew up a huge Jerry Lawler fan, so to see him in a movie role, Under a Mask, and just how it went down, and that ring I do remember was not a wrestling ring; it was a boxing ring. And if you've ever been in a boxing ring, it's very, very stiff. So, but we had a good time shooting that, and to watch that movie, and it came out, and there was some child actors in that have gone on to have careers. So it was a lot of fun, great memory, and to this day, I'll still get a paycheck here and there. Not a lot, but it's still coming in.
Now, Jeff, you've had the opportunity to play various characters over your time in this crazy business called pro wrestling. You were the young up-and-comer in the USWA. You were the world's greatest entertainer in the WWF. You were the chosen one in WCW. And, of course, the king of the mountain in TNA. What would you say was probably the most fun Jeff Jarrett had while, being out there playing these roles?
Well, you're forgetting one role, the Double J MMA.
The Double J MMA Challenge,
which I retired undefeated to this day.
There you go.
I've never been pinned or submitted, in knocked out, anything in MMA. So I retired undefeated. As the evolution that you go in this business, and again to revert back to me growing up in the business, you have to keep I don't want to say reinventing, but you have to sort of keep evolving and as you roll along. And I credit. I'm blessed that I was, a third-generation guy, and to sit back and look at different things and look at different people's careers on how they, just sort of continue to turn the prism and do things a little different as the months and years roll along with your career. So I enjoyed all the aspects.
And there was a time in the WWF, there was two moments for me that I really enjoyed them because I was fans of not only yourself, but also the people that you got to work with, and you've gotten to work with some of the biggest names in the world. I know some key moments for me was getting to see you work with the guys like The Undertaker, and of course that time you actually got to work with China, and also at that point getting to work with the Macho Man. Three people who I've definitely been a big fan of, as well as you, and getting to work with these people. I mean, in the opportunity that you had to work with some of these biggest names, what was that like for you? Did you enjoy? Was there anybody that you didn't enjoy working with? Those are just key moments for me, but I mean.
Yeah, growing up in the business, you learn that it is a business and that everybody brings a different skill set, to the table, and you got to adapt. And I sort of prided myself over the years that you have to adapt to certain situations. And the three individuals you just mentioned all had a different set of skill set. The Macho Man was such a unique. There was only one. There will only ever be one Macho Man. And, him and my father did some serious business together. And Jerry Lawler, Randy Savage feud was very, very unique and intense matches, made a lot of money. So, there's a history with all of those, but you just sort of got to learn to adapt to certain people's skill set.
Absolutely.
Now, when you talk about adapting the skill sets, one of the things that impresses me the most, switching gears and talking about Global Force Wrestling, is this roster that you're assembling, Jeff, and just the great mix of experienced names like a Scott Steiner or a Colt Cabana, and then some of these young up-and-coming guys who are going to be stars for the next 5-10 years, like the Young Bucks or Moose, or Seiya Sanada. Nick Aldis, a.k.a. Magnus, recently signed up and joined the Force. What's been the most fun part for Jeff Jarrett in terms of, switching gears from being the superstar in the ring to being the man behind this promotion?
Well, I believe that, and I've said it on multiple interviews, that the free agent talent pool is as deep as it's ever been. So that's very exciting from a promoter's perspective, that you look out there and you see, the New Japan roster, you see the AAA roster, you see the independent scene roster, you see, we've got Bobby Roode coming to Las Vegas next week. He's, probably the best bell-to-bell guy that's on the TNA roster. So it's very exciting. And these fresh matchups, again, as a fan, I'm excited to see that, the different styles mesh, who's going to shape up against who, and just how everything sort of, as it rolls out, it's very exciting to me.
It's awesome. And it's got to be a great moment for you, as it was announced and it shocked the wrestling world, to see the King of the Mountain and the Queen of the Mountain return to Impact Wrestling. It definitely left a lot of people like, what is going on here? What was that like for you to return? It was almost like a homecoming, if you will. Come back to TNA Wrestling and just make your mark, and you did. You definitely made another mark and made history right then and there.
It was different. It was unique. It was raw emotion that played out. Everybody that saw that or has seen it online at GFW Wrestling on our YouTube channel, it was really a surreal moment in several ways. And to go into that match very unexpectedly over a week or so time and against Eric Young and Bobby Roode, two guys that I have a 15-year history with and got a ton of respect for those guys. And then, Matt Hardy, who's he's right up there at the very, very tip top when it comes to ladder type matches. And then Drew Galloway, a raw international talent that brought his A game. It was really a cool moment. And now that the King of the Mountain title is in Global Force's possession, that's going to get real interesting as well.
Absolutely.
Well, you mentioned your time at TNA, and I've been a TNA fan back to the Asylum days, so I've been down with TNA since day one. And of course, you can't write the history of TNA without mentioning the name Jeff Jarrett multiple times. And I wonder, Jeff, now going forward with Global Force, are there lessons that you learned while you were running things in TNA that you're like, okay, maybe I want to do things a different way now with GFW than we did them back with TNA?
Well, I mean, if you don't take all of your life experiences, not just in business, but in your personal relationships, shame on you. So, yes, I mean, you take all of your experiences, and the world has changed drastically over the last 10, 15 years as it relates to, I call it the consumer consumption world, whether it be broadcast, television, cable, streaming services, digital. It's just a much smaller world as well. With the click of the button, you can watch the WWE Network, or you can watch YouTube and watch AAA, New Japan, independent promotions. It's just the world is completely different, and it really excites me that as we roll into Vegas next week and we start producing our very first episode of AMP, that we've got a challenge to roll this out, not just in North America, but in around the globe. And our challenge is to let every imaginable Global Force Wrestling fan have an opportunity to see AMP, and we're going to give them that. We're in the final stages of figuring that out, but it's a very exciting time.
And I know it had to be a pretty cool moment for you as well. I mean, most of us, most fans, me personally speaking, would have felt that you would have been definitely one of the first people named for this, but getting the fact that you were given that opportunity to be inducted into the TNA Wrestling Hall of Fame, how did that make you feel? I'm very curious to hear about that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's and I've always said this about any Hall of Fame, that it's not up to the individual, and if the honor comes, that you accept it and move on. But the Baseball Hall of Fame writers vote on that. Every Hall of Fame it has a different set of circumstances. So it goes without saying, you're not getting into the WWE Hall of Fame unless Vince McMahon says so. And the exact same thing with the TNA Hall of Fame. No one's getting into that unless Dixie Carter says they're going in. So I appreciated it. It was a very, very nice moment. The thing that I took away from that, and I've been asked that, what's your takeaway, is that the fans really, really enjoyed it in the Impact Zone. I think they sincerely were appreciative of that night, and that made me feel good because I've said it. The wrestling fan has put groceries on the Jarrett's table for 70 years, and I'm very thankful for that.
Very well.
Now, Something you said, I think it was about a year ago, Jeff, when you said that we're getting ready for the another wrestling boom, and I think a lot of people kind of scoffed at that, but I think you're right, because as you mentioned, we live in an age where the media has accelerated, where the content for the consumer is probably as great or greater than it was back in the heyday in the 90s and the 80s. You've got companies like ROH and Lucha Underground, of course, the WWE, TNA, AAA, New Japan, and now you've got Global Force entering into this arena, if you will. In terms of what sets you guys apart from the other companies out there, what do you think is Global Force's main strength, main calling card that would get a new fan to watch?
Well, we are definitely, as a part of our mission statement, we want to bring multiple promotions and multiple talents and multiple fresh matchups under one umbrella. And we not only want to work with the major companies like a New Japan or a AAA, but the independent promotions. This past weekend in Cleveland, we took Johnny Gargano, who is AIW, local star, local promotion, very, very well run local promotion, and he was in our main event. So we want to operate not just on a global level, but on a real local level and reach out to these promotions, recognize them. We did that in Erie, Pennsylvania. We did that in Appleton, Wisconsin. We've done that on all of our shows. That we've had some NWA involvement in Knoxville, Tennessee. We had just local guys that really integrate into the night of professional wrestling. That in and of itself is one way. And then, not that the other organizations are not really on top of social media on all platforms, but we strive to do that not only on a daily basis, but really on an hourly basis. Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, go on and on. Our website, we want to engage in the fan base. We want to hear, we obviously want to hear what their feedback is, good, bad, or indifferent, but we really want to engage the Global Force fan as much as we possibly can.
No, real quick, Jeff, when you talk about the interaction between different organizations, as a fan growing up back in the day when I could come home and watch, World Class or USWA, and then occasionally you get a little bit of a crossover. Why do you think we don't see that now from some of these promotions that are a little bit smaller than the WWE? Is it just ego or politics that get in the way?
I almost think it's a mindset that for so many years there were, basically there was WWE, and WWF at the time, and WCW, and then there were, very, very, very small promotions around the world. And at that time, the territories were quote unquote sort of dying off, whether it be Texas or Puerto Rico or Kansas City or Portland or whatever. So it was a transition area of the business. And back in the territory days, everybody operated through an alliance, a handshake agreement that this is, I'll run these 3 states, and you run these 4, and you run these 2, and after this one and all that. So there was sort of a handshake agreement. And then when both companies went national, they operated, and now we're, in my opinion, taking things to another level that I believe that with WWE and their 50, 60, 70-year history and 90+% share of the marketplace, that all the other promotions should, go back to, if you want to say it, go back to the handshake agreement, that to work together on some level. Do you have to marry one another? No, but sort of date each other and have a handshake agreement and give the fans what they want, have fresh matchups, and when each promotion has a big show, assist and try to make it as big a show as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're all striving to make the wrestling industry healthy.
Amen.
Very true. I am curious, have you actually had the opportunity to check out the WWE Network? Because I know each generation now, with this generation, gets reintroduced to things that happened, say, 10, 15, 20 years ago, and a new batch of fans get to be reintroduced to old Double J, J-E, double F, J-A, double R-E, double T. That's Double J, Jeff Jarrett. I didn't mean to throw that out there, but I mean, what are your thoughts on the WWE Network introducing a whole new batch of fans to those who started it back in the 90s, even in the 80s, and a whole different talent pool that was around back then? I mean, what do you think about all that?
Well, Vince McMahon is a visionary. He's always been a visionary, and it's great because he's taking, thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of the library, and he's just barely tipping his toe in the out there. There's thousands of hours yet to be released, but I think it's great. I think it's great for the industry. But because it just expands it on so many levels. Then you have other discussions and things coming out about different streaming services. But absolutely, I'm a WWE Network watcher. I've got 5 kids, so they're at times the network watchers. But no, it's revolutionary. It's ahead of the curve. That's where everything's headed. There will be NFL. All the major franchises, whether it's sporting or entertainment, that's where the world's headed. And Vince is again ahead of the curve.
I agree, and one of the things that in terms of Global Force and the roster, one of the names that jumped out to me as soon as I saw it, Jeff, I'm a broadcaster, and a commentary team can add to the experience of a wrestling match, and sometimes, unfortunately, it can bring it down. But one of the names that jumped out to me, and maybe it's because you are an undefeated mixed martial artist, as we mentioned earlier, was Chael Sonnen. How did you get in contact with Chael, and how did that relationship come about?
And Chael said it on a couple of our YouTube posts that he did a show with Jim Ross, and Chael is a student of the professional wrestling game. He loves it, and he reached out, and we went back and forth, and then as you would have it, we came to an agreement, and he's the expert and analyst. We're stepping in, and I've got as we roll along, it's going to be very exciting because Chael, legend in the MMA world, current ESPN MMA analyst, and now he's a part of Global Force as being an analyst. It's exciting times. It really is.
Okay, and where would
guys,
you like to see?
I'm going to have to wrap up shortly. So let's wind this down. But go ahead, continue.
Sure. I got one more question, Nate. If you got one more, go ahead.
All right. My thing would just be, Jeff, and like I said, I've been watching you for a while, various stages of your career, and now as you enter this new chapter of your career and your life with Global Force, what would be the one message you have to the fans out there that might be like, I'm not sure, what would you do to, just kind of sell them on Global Force and convince them to join the force, if you will?
We are professional wrestling. If you want a sample on how we're not going to write stories, we're going to document them, and we're going to bring every GFW athlete has a story, why they want to be in this business, why they want to be a part of GFW, why they want to become a champion, why do they want to be in a main event. Check out our YouTube page. Our production team is phenomenal, and sample globalforcewrestling.com, and we want to continue to, take professional wrestling into 2015 and beyond. We're going to Vegas. We have our 4 titles tournaments starting next Friday, and we're going to crown 4 champions as we roll along with our dates in Vegas and from the Global Championship, Tag Championship, Women's Championship, and then you have our Next Gen. And Next Gen is not really about a weight class. It's not really about different styles of wrestling. It's about the next generation, whether it's be a guy that's getting I'll call it a reboot or a brand new fresh face. It's the next generation that these guys want to take their game to the next level.
Okay.
And on behalf of myself and Nate, I only have one little request, if it's possible, if it's okay. Would you be able to say, in this case, this is the King of the Mountain, Jeff Jarrett, and you're listening to Pipebomb Radio? And that would be my final request. Whenever you're ready.
This is the King of the Mountain, Jeff Jarrett, the founder and CEO of Global Force Wrestling, and you're listening to Pipebomb Radio.
That's awesome. Mr. Jarrett,
ain't he great, Felix? Ain't he great?
Ain't he great? That's right. That's right. On behalf of myself and Nate, Mr. Jarrett, it's an honor to have you on, sir. Hopefully we look to have you on again in the near future to talk about the success of Global Force. In the meantime, I hope you have a great day, sir.
You do the same. Appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
All
right, you take it. Bye-bye. Thank you. The legendary Jeff Jarrett, as Nate said, ain't he great? That was freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You know what? I know we could have touched on a lot more, and I understand Mr. Jarrett's under time constraints, but we'll get him back. We'll definitely get him back as Global Force continues to rock the world, rule the world. You know what? They may even surpass TNA in popularity. Who's to say? I know the one thing that I only feel that TNA lacks, and this is not to their detriment. Well, maybe it is in a way, but is they're missing that television audience. They're missing what they had when they had Spike, because Spike was more available to more people. I was watching when it was still on Spike. Unfortunately, not everybody has Destination America. Now, if Jeff can nail a good television deal with a great television site, whatever you want to call it, I think they stand a better chance of getting more visibility out there than Impact is right now. And I really hope so, because I see potential in this company to go very far, because you look back to the days of the Asylum, as you were talking about with him. Nobody expected that company to last. Nobody did.
Yeah.
And look at it now, 13, 14 years later. Look at where they're at. They've had names like a Sting, a Hogan, a Savage, Flair. They've had even, first and foremost, Jeff Jarrett, Ken Shamrock. My goodness, they've had a who's who in that company come through, and that company is still around.
Yeah, not only guys like that, not only the established superstars, but you got to look at the guys that they brought up and groomed through TNA, guys like Samoa Joe, guys like AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, guys that Kurt Angle had a resurgence in his career through coming to TNA. And so I'd like TNA to do well, but when you mention the Global Force comparison, man, I think, and this is no offense to Dixie Carter and the people at TNA, but the difference between their front office and Global Force Wrestling's front office is like Jeff was talking about. You've got a third-generation superstar, somebody that was born into the business, somebody that understands that medium is changing now, with the way that people consume wrestling, the way people consume sports and entertainment, that I think Jeff is ahead of the curve, where sometimes I think Dixie and the people at TNA are behind the curve.
Yeah, sadly, I believe that's 100% true. It's disheartening, because you want to see these companies succeed, and I'm not saying that they're gonna disappear tomorrow. I mean, obviously TNA is still around, but they're lacking something that I really feel is what they lost when they lost Jeff. And I don't think they've completely lost him, but it's not the same as it was.
No.
Deep down, I believe, and I could be wrong, and I may be wrong for saying this. I don't really know. There has been a rumor that Jeff is still somewhat of a minority shareholder in the company. I don't know if that's true or not. It's not for me to say if it's true. That's just only speculation. And right now, his full force is in the Global Force, and I'm glad you touched on a lot of it. I know I definitely wanted to touch on more of Global Force, and you hit it more than I could have, and that's just awesome, because I know that's what he definitely wanted to push. But all things considered, I think we dipped our toes, if you will, into little parts of his career, even mentioning his movie career that he had. And maybe I was wrong. It's been 20 years since I've seen that movie, but...
No, you were right. He was in that movie you were talking about. He was in Life with Mikey with Michael J. Fox, and then he was also, I don't know if you remember that movie, Spring Breakers, from a couple years ago.
Oh, name doesn't ring
the
a
one
bell.
The one with James Franco, where he had the dreadlocks and everything.
Oh, my God. Okay.
He was in Spring Breakers playing a youth minister.
Oh, okay. But yeah, now correct me if I'm wrong. Was Lawler in the mask, or was Jarrett in the mask? I could have sworn Jeff was in the mask.
Yeah, Jeff. I think Jeff was in the mask fighting Lawler.
Okay. Because I remember Jerry was still kind of. He was obviously his active heel, and I know when I heard Jeff get on the mic, I knew it was him immediately when I heard his voice. And yeah, I just
I'm looking it up right now on Wikipedia. Apparently, his character's name was the Evil Eye.
But like I said, we dipped our toes into a little bit and touched a little bit about not just the WWE, not just the USWA, not just his lineage. I got corrected. I apologize. His grandmother was not a booker. She did, obviously Jeff cleared that up, but his father was. And
yes.
Getting to get all aspects of it and being fascinated with it at a young age. Obviously, that's why I said he's got a mind for this, and he's gonna bread. I keep saying bread. He's gonna train the future of, or not even really train, but he's preparing the future with his talent pool that he's got, like the names that you mentioned. Not many people are fans of the Young Bucks, but you know what? They've got a hell of a lot of talent. I think they don't like them only because of their attitudes, and that's probably why WWE didn't sign them, because they're not corporate molded people.
Yeah.
Whereas Jeff is going to let them do what they're going to do, at the same time have a level of respect for the company, of course. WWE is more corporate, whereas these other independent circuits are not. And that's not a bad thing, but it's understandable. why a lot of people are choosing not to go to WWE. And like I said, and everybody said, obviously we all want to see all these companies succeed, and therefore it's only going to benefit more to see more companies out there and give the fans above anything else an alternative to watch. Because right now,
my
with
favorite part,
with
Felix,
WWE, we need other companies out there. Just saying.
Yeah, and my favorite part about what Jeff had to say, Felix, was when he was like, these companies need to work together, because I think oftentimes people get too stubborn, and there's too much ego, and there's too much, why would I work with that guy? When in reality, man, the best way for the business as a whole to get better is by working together, is by sharing talent, is by helping out if you can and when you can. And so I think it's going to be crazy, man. Like, we could be looking at a wrestling world 5 or 10 years from now where the two biggest companies are run by Triple H and Jeff Jarrett.
I didn't even think about that, but that's a good point. I know Vinnie Max, he's getting older now, but I just don't think that old bastard's ever going to ever leave. He's not going to leave the wrestling business. He'll be in his wheelchair and his Alzheimer's and be like, Hogan did that to Andre. Wait, what year is this? I'm just kidding. No, but that crazy old coot, I don't think he'll ever be gone from the wrestling business until the day the good Lord takes him and takes him to that big ring in the sky, and he'll be battling Macho Man Randy Savage or the American Dream, baby.
he'll be sitting ringside calling the matches. What a maneuver!
That's right. He'll be there calling the action with maybe, dare I say, Gordon Soley, for all we know.
Or even Gorilla Monsoon.
Oh yes. Will you stop? I'm just kidding. But no, I find myself watching old WrestleMania moments with Gorilla and Bobby and just laughing because those two were just classic together. But I definitely look forward to bringing Jeff back. Definitely thank his contacts at Global Force. I believe it was public relations PR people at Global Force that helped me set this up. It's been an ongoing process that I finally paid off, and it was just an honor to have him on. Definitely one of the biggest names we've had on thus far in 2015, next to Bret the Hitman Hart earlier this year.
It's crazy, Felix, when you think about it. We talked to Jeff for about 30 minutes or so, and we barely scratched the surface of his lengthy career.
Oh, yeah, and he's been around. I mean, he's the man, like I think he's like 46, 47, and he's been around the wrestling business his entire life. So, yeah, I mean, I know his main goal was to push Global Force, but I would definitely love a more in-depth interview with him to and it's not so much to nitpick or pinpoint anything in particular, but to just talk about those times. Talk about working with the Roadie back in the 90s against Razor and the Kid. Talking about working in there and choke on that, slap nuts, and even back to those USWA days, even back to working, and his memories of those battles between the Macho Man and Jerry Lawler. Because I've heard nothing but good things about those feuds, and their matches were freaking they weren't matches, they were freaking wars. Randy and Jerry back in the day. Whew.
Yes. And man, here's the thing, like, you talk about somebody's career. We mentioned some of the different characters, and I even forgot the Double J MMA Challenge, which was a cool gimmick in TNA. But, man, you talk about being the chosen one and being down with Vince Russo in WCW, or Jeff Jarrett when he was trying to become a member of the Four Horsemen. Like, he's had so many interesting phases of his career, and I think that, and you can hear it from the excitement in Jeff's voice when he talked about Global Force. I think this next phase, or this current phase as the CEO of Global Force, is probably one of the most exciting things he's ever done.
I think so too. I think he gets more excitement, more excited to watch this new crop. That's what I was saying. When he started this with Impact Wrestling back in the day, to get to mold and work with these young talents and mold them for the future, and make them some of the biggest names in the world. And I really believe, and I believe they do credit Jeff a lot, and that's why they trust him, and that's why they want to work with him. But he knows what he's doing in that ring. He knows what he's doing behind the scenes. And as I said, these youngsters need to definitely take notice and learn from this man, because his talent is endless. He's got so much talent to give, and so much information and so much knowledge about the wrestling business to share. All you got to do is just sit down and learn. As we obviously here, we were sitting at the learning tree, at the Jarrett learning tree, learning about the man, the myth, the legend himself. And you know what, I'll be honest with you. I know it's probably not something we probably could have talked about with Jeff right now, but maybe for the future for sure. WWE would be silly for not acknowledging this man's the credibility he's built in every organization he's been a part of. You know, he's worked in the matches that he's put on, and I just mentioned those names, and I think if anything, if he pinpointed Macho Man, it's because he was a bigger fan of Randy than any of the other two that I mentioned, which is fine. It's not saying that I was pinpointing anybody in particular, but those three were the names that stood out to me the most for the work he did with them. I could have said Razor, but I mean, I just because of the fact that I'm a fan of China, I'm a fan of Savage, and I'm a fan of Taker, that I brought those up. You know, I really believe the WWE would be seriously just wrong for not acknowledging Jeff. Differences aside, because I really believe if the day comes, and I believe it will, that China gets her induction into the Hall of Fame, Jeff should be right up there with her.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. And especially, you know, not just for his WWE work, but you mentioned the WWE, right now they're kind of in charge of the history of wrestling, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. But, you know, you've got his WWF years, you've got his WCW years, and you've got his USWA years, all stuff that is under the WWE umbrella to one extent or another. And it's like, man, this guy definitely should be recognized not only from the TNA Hall of Fame, which he is going in this year, but the WWE Hall of Fame. And I think it'd be a great thing. And the other thing you mentioned real quick, Felix, you talk about how he molded a lot of guys in TNA, and you talk about AJ Styles or Samoa Joe or Magnus, Nick Aldis, who is signed with Global Force, you know, just the respect they have for Jeff Jarrett. And I think this could be even better than his time in TNA, because my one criticism with Jeff Jarrett during his time in TNA, you know, 10, 15 years ago, was that he was molding all these young superstars, but at the same time, he was still an active wrestler. And it's got to be pretty hard to, if you're an active wrestler, who do you trust the most? Yourself. And so I think it's probably easiest to put yourself in main events and allow yourself to be one of the focuses of the promotion. Whereas now, you know, 10, 15 years later, Jeff, he still wrestles, but he's not an active wrestler like he was back then in TNA. And so now you get the best of both worlds. You get Jeff Jarrett, who can come up with these great ideas and can mold this young talent, but you also have a Jeff Jarrett that doesn't have to worry about, you know, what am I going to do with my character? You know, because I think that's a hard thing to do sometimes when you have to look out for the company's best interest as well as your own. And now he can just focus on the company.
There you go. You hit the nail on the head with that one. And with that, we're going to go ahead and bring this interview to a close. An incredible hour that we've had. I mean, we had Jeff on for 30 minutes, and in the meantime, we talked about just so many landmark moments, historic moments in his career that we got to speak with him about, and also after before he came on and after he left. But just to sum up his career in one word, legendary. We can't thank Global Force Wrestling enough. We can't thank the founder, of course, as he mentioned, for not only coming on and just taking a moment to stroll through time in his career to talk about what he's done, where he's been, and where he's going with his new company, Global Force Wrestling, but to also cut a quick promo for us and saying, you know, this is the King of the Mountain, the founder of Global Force Wrestling, and you are listening to Pipebomb Radio. Cool moment.
Send that to Elio right now.
Elio, if you're listening, pal, you got to handle this. No, definitely an honor, and we thank him for sparing time today to do this with us. This won't be the last time we'll have him on. I can guarantee you that. I'll definitely work hard, and if it means we get him back next year, hey, we will welcome him back next year with open arms. Definitely back into the Pipebomb Wrestling family, Pipebomb Radio Wrestling family. Hello. Anyways, on behalf of myself, Felix, and of course Nate Milton for Pipebomb Radio, we will bring this to a close, saying keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. Good night, everybody. Talk to you soon, Nate.
All right, Felix, I'm going to go listen to With My Baby Tonight like 10 times, and I'll talk to you next week.
All right, bye.